Great, Hare Krishna. Welcome everybody. Chapter 4, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta. We'll start with the auspicious Mangalacharanam prayers to kick things off. And we'll do it all together.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Tanumani Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschachari Jatarine Hare Krishna. So we're reading from chapter 4 of the first volume, and that's called How Shall I Serve You? So it kicks off with an excerpt from a letter written by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to Srila Prabhupada in December 1936. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings to the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. In October of 1932, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati led a group of hundreds of disciples and pilgrims on a month-long parikrama, or circumambulation, of the sacred places of Vrindavan. Vrindavan residents and visitors performed parikrama by following the old dry bed of the Yamuna River and circumambulating the Vrindavan area, stopping at the places where Krishna performed his pastimes when he roamed in Vrindavan 5,000 years ago. Abai had wanted to attend Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's parikrama, but couldn't because of his work. Nevertheless, on the 20th day of the pilgrimage, he travelled from Allahabad, intent on seeing Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati again and hoping to join the parikrama party at Kosi, just outside Vrindavan, at least for a day. The parikrama Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had organised was one of the biggest ever seen in Vrindavan. By engaging so many people, he was using the parikrama as a method of mass preaching. Even as early as 1918, when he had first begun his missionary work, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's specific contribution had been his emphasis on preaching. Prior to his advent, the Vaishnavas had generally avoided populated places, and they had performed their worship in holy, secluded places like Vrindavan. Even when they travelled to preach, they would maintain the simple mode of the impoverished mendicant. The Goswami followers during Lord Chaitanya's time had lived in Vrindavan underneath trees, one night under one tree, the next night under another. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, whose aim was on preaching worldwide, knew that the renunciation of the Goswamis was not possible for Westerners. Therefore, he wanted to introduce the idea that devotees could even live in a big palatial temple. He had accepted a large donation from a wealthy Vaishnava merchant, and in 1930 had constructed a large marble temple in the Bug Bazaar section of Calcutta. In the same year, he had moved, along with many followers, from his small rented quarters at Altadanga to the impressive new headquarters. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was demonstrating that although a devotee should not spend a cent for his own sense gratification, he could spend millions of rupees for the service of Krishna. While previously Vaishnavas would not have had anything to do with the mechanized contrivances introduced by the British, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, on the authority of scripture, was demonstrating a higher understanding. It was Rupa Goswami, the great disciple of Lord Chaitanya, who had written, "One is perfectly detached from all materialistic, worldly entanglement, not when one gives up everything, but when one employs everything for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This is understood to be perfect renunciation in yoga. If everything is God's energy, then why should anything be given up? If God is good, then his energy is also good. Material things should not be used for one's own sense enjoyment, but they could be and should be used for the service of Krishna." So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to use the most modern printing presses. He wanted to invite worldly people to hear Krishna Katha in gorgeously built temples. And for their preaching, devotees should not hesitate to ride in the best conveyances, wear sewn cloth, or live amidst material opulence. It was in this spirit that he had constructed the building at Bug Bazaar and there displayed a theistic exhibition, a series of dioramas assembled from finely finished, painted and dressed clay dolls. Such dolls are a traditional art form in Bengal, but the staging of nearly 100 elaborate displays depicting the Vaishnava philosophy and the pastimes of Lord Krishna had never before been seen. The theistic exhibition created a sensation, and thousands attended it daily. In that same year, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had taken about 40 disciples on a parikrama all over India, a tour featuring many public lectures and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's meetings with important men. By 1932, he had 3 presses in different parts of India, printing 6 journals in various Indian dialects. In Calcutta, a politician had asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati how he could possibly print his Nadia Prakash as a daily newspaper. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had replied that it was not so amazing if one considered that in Calcutta alone there were almost half a dozen ordinary daily newspapers, although Calcutta was but one city amongst all the cities of India. India was but one nation amongst many nations on the earth. The earth was but an insignificant planet amidst all the other planets in the universe. This universe was one amongst universes so numerous that each was like a single mustard seed in a big bag of mustard seeds. And the entire material creation was only one small fraction of the creation of God. Nadia Prakash was not printing the news of Calcutta or the earth, but news from the unlimited spiritual sky, which is much greater than all the material worlds combined. So if the daily Calcutta newspapers could report limited earthly tidings, then small wonder that Nadia Prakash could appear daily. In fact, a newspaper about the spiritual world could be printed every moment, were there not a shortage of interested readers. One of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's publications was in English, The Harmonist, and it advertised the Vrindavan Parikrama of 1932. And here's an excerpt. Circumambulation of Sri Braj Mandal. His Divine Grace Paramahamsa Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, the spiritual head of the Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava community, following Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has been pleased to invite the cooperation of all persons of every nationality, irrespective of caste, creed, colour, age, or sex, in the devotional function of circumambulation of the holy sphere of Braj in the footsteps of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who exhibited the Leela of performing the circumambulation of Sri Braj Mandal during the winter of 1514 AD.
When Abai had heard from the members of the Allahabad Gaudiya Mat about the parikrama, he had been fully occupied with his local Prayag pharmacy business and travelling to secure new accounts. But he had calculated how he could join at least for a day or two, and he had fixed his mind on again obtaining the darshan of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Srila Prabhupada, I was not initiated at the time of the parikrama, but I had very good admiration for these Gaudiya Mat people. They were very kind to me, so I thought, what are these people doing in this parikrama? Let me go. So I met them at Koshi. The parikrama party travelled with efficient organisation. An advance group bringing all the bedding and tents would go ahead to the next day's location, where they would make camp and set up the kitchen. Meanwhile, the main party, bearing the deity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and accompanied by kirtan singers, would visit the places of Lord Krishna's pastimes and in the evening arrive in camp. The camp was divided into sections and arranged in a semicircle, and pilgrims were assigned to a particular section for the night. In the centre were the quarters of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and the deity of Lord Chaitanya, and close by the tents of the sannyasis. There were separate camps for ladies and men. Married couples did not stay together. There was also a volunteer corps of guards who stayed up all night patrolling the area. At night, the camp, with its hundreds of tents with gas lights and campfires, resembled a small town, and local people would come to see, astonished at the arrangements. In the evening, everyone would gather to hear a discourse by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The pilgrims would rise early each morning and chant Hare Krishna together. Then, carrying the deity of Lord Chaitanya, they would set out in procession. Kirtan groups, the police band, the lead horse, the flag bearers, and all the pilgrims. They travelled to the holy places, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, the place where Lord Krishna slew Kamsa, the Adikeshava temple, Radhakund, Shamakund, and many others. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's massive pilgrimage had been rolling on with great success when he met with serious opposition. The local temple proprietors in Vrindavan objected to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's awarding the sacred Brahminical thread to devotees not born in the families of Brahmanas. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, throughout his lectures and writings, had repeatedly proven from the Vedic scriptures that one is a Brahmana not by birth but by qualities. He often cited a verse from Sanatana Goswami's Hari Bhakti Vilas, stating that just as base metal when mixed with mercury can become gold, so an ordinary man can become a Brahmana if initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. He also often cited a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, in which the great sage Narada tells King Yudhisthira that if one is born in the family of a Sudra but acts as a Brahmana, he has to be accepted as a Brahmana, and if one is born in the family of a Brahmana but acts as a Sudra, he is to be considered a Sudra. Because the prime method of spiritual advancement in the age of Kali is the chanting of the holy name of God, any person who chants Hare Krishna should be recognized as a saintly person. When the local pandits approached Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati for discussion, they questioned his leniency in giving initiation and his awarding the Brahminical thread and sannyas dress to those of lower castes. Because of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's scholarly, forceful presentation, the Pandits seemed satisfied by the discussion. But when the Parikrama party arrived at Vrindavan's 7 main temples, which had been erected by the immediate followers of Lord Chaitanya, the party found the doors closed. Vrindavan shopkeepers closed their businesses, and some people even threw stones at the passing pilgrims. But the Parikrama party, led by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, continued in good spirits, despite the animosity, and on October 28th, the party arrived at Kosi, the site of the treasury of Krishna's father, King Nanda.
Kavi, you've just appeared on our screen magically, somehow. You have been obviously chosen to read by some cosmic arrangement. Please.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, where did we get to again?
Abai arrived in Mathura.
Okay, I've got it. Abai arrived in Mathura by train from Allahabad and approached Kosi by rickshaw. The countryside was full of charm for Abai. Instead of factories and large buildings, there were mostly forests. And aside from the main paved road on which he travelled, there were only dirt roads and soft sandy lanes. As a Vaishnav, Abai felt sensations as an ordinary man wouldn't. Now and then he sighted a peacock in the field, its exotic plumage proclaiming the glories of Vrindavana and Krishna. Even a non-devotee, however, could appreciate the many varieties of birds, their interesting cries and songs filling the air. Occasionally, a tree would be filled with madly chirping sparrows, making their urgent twilight clamor before resting for the night. Even one unaware of the special significance of Vrindavan could feel a relief of mind in this simple countryside, where people built fires from cow manure fuel and cooked their evening meals in the open. Their fires adding rich natural smells to their indefinable mixture, which was the odor of the earth. There were many gnarled old trees and colorful stretches of flowers, bushes of bright violet camellia trees abloom with delicate white projecta blossoms and big yellow kamdan flowers, rarely seen outside of Vrindavan. On the road there was lively horse-drawn Danga traffic. The month of Kartika, October-November, was one of the several times of the year that drew many pilgrims to Vrindavan. The one-horse Dangas carried large families, some coming from hundreds of miles away. Larger bands of pilgrims, grouped by village, walked together. The women dressed in bright-colored saris, brown-skinned men and women sometimes singing bhajans, carrying but a few simple possessions as they headed for the town of thousands of temples in Darwin. And that there were businessmen like Abe dressed more formally, coming from a city, maybe to spend the weekend. Most of them had at least some semblance of a religious motive: to see Krishna in the temple, to bath in the holy Yamuna river, to visit the sites where Lord Krishna had performed his pastimes, such as lifting of the Govardhan hill, the killing of the Kesi demon, or the dancing in the evening with the gopis. Abai was sensitive to the atmosphere of Vrindavan, and he noted the activity along the road. But more than that, he cherished with the anticipation the fulfillment of his journey, his meeting again. After a long separation, the saintly person he had always thought of within himself, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who had spoken to him in Kolkata and had convinced him of Lord Chaitanya's vision to preach Krishna consciousness. Abai would soon see him again, and this purpose filled his mind. Upon reaching the lantern-illuminated camp of Kodhiamat and inquiring at the registration post, he was allowed to join the Prakram village. He was assigned to a tent. Garshta men was offered a prasadam, The people were friendly and in good spirits, and Abhay of his activities with the Mata members in Calcutta and Allahabad. Then there was a gathering. A sannyasi was making an announcement. This evening, he said, there would be a scheduled visit to a nearby temple to see the deity of Saraswati Vishnu. Some of the pilgrims shared Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. The sannyasi also announced that His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would speak that evening for the last time and would be leaving the parikram party the next day. So there was a choice of going on the parikrama or staying for the lecture. Sri Prabhupada, so I met them in Kosi, and Keshwa Maharaja was informing that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is going to Mathur tomorrow morning and he will speak Hare Katha this evening. Anyone who wants to may remain, or otherwise they may go to see Senior Sri Vishnu. So at that time, I think only 10 or 12 men remained. Shraddha Maharaja was one of them, and I thought it wise. What can I see at the sannyasi? Let me hear what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati will speak. Let me hear. When Abhay arrived, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was already speaking. He sat with the back erect, a shawl around his shoulders, not speaking like a professional lecturer giving a scheduled performance, but addressing a small gathering in his room. At the last, Abhay was in the presence again. Abhay marveled to see and hear him. This unique soul possessed of Krishna Katha, speaking uninterruptedly about Krishna in his deep, low voice, in ecstasy and deep knowledge. Abhay sat and heard with rapt attention. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been speaking regularly about Sampana, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha is the stage of devotional service in which awareness of God is awakened. Abhigaya is rendering loving service to the Lord, and Prajanjana is the ultimate goal, pure love of God. He stressed that his explanations were an exact recapitulation of what he had originally been spoken by Krishna, and passed down through disciplined succession. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's particular utterance, mostly Bengali but sometimes English, with frequent quoting of Sanskrit from the sastras, was deep with intrusion. It is Krishna, said Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who is the only super lord over the entire universe and beyond it, of Vaikunta, a transcendental region. As such, no one can raise any obstacle against his enjoyment. An hour went by, 2 hours. The already small gathering in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's room gradually thinned. A few sannyasis left, excusing themselves to tend to duties connected with the Parikrama camp. Only a few intimate leaders remained. Abhay was the only outsider, of course. He was a devotee, not an outsider, but in the sense that he was not a sannyasi, was not handling any duties, was not even initiated, and was not traveling with a parikrama, but had joined only for a day. In that sense, he was an outsider. The philosophy Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was speaking, however, was democratically open to whoever would give an ardent hearing, and that Abhay was doing. He was listening with wonder. Sometimes he would not even understand something, but he would go on listening intently, submissively, his intelligence drinking in the words he felt, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati revealing to him the direct vision of the spiritual world, just as a person reveals something by opening a door or pushing aside a curtain. He was revealing the reality, and this reality was loving service to the lotus feet of Radha Krishna, the supremely worshipful personality of Godhead. How masterfully he spoke, and with the utter conviction and boldness. It was with such awe that Abhay listened with fastened attention, of course. All Vaishnavas accepted Krishna as their worshipful Lord, but how conducively and with the sound logic was the faith of Vaishnavas established by this great teacher. After several hours, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stopped speaking. I felt prepared to go on this cessation, and yet he had no puzzling doubts or queries to place forward. He wanted only to hear more. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta made his exit, Abhay bowed, offering his obeisances, and then left the immediate circle of sannyasis in their row of tents, and went to the outer circle of tents, his mind surged with the words of spiritual master. Now their relationship seemed more tangible. He still treasured his original impression of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the saintly person who had spoken to him on the rooftop in Calcutta. But tonight, the single impression that had sustained him for years in Allahabad had been enriched and filled with new life. The spiritual master and the impression of his words were as much a reality as the stars in the sky and the moon over Darwin. That impression of hearing from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was filing him with its reality, and all other reality was forming itself around the absolute reality of Srila Gurudeva, just as all the planets circle around the sun. The next morning, Abhay was up with the others more than an hour before dawn, bath and chanting mantras in congregation. Later in the morning, the tall, stately figure of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, dressed in plain saffron, got into a backseat of a car and rode away from the camp. Thoughtful and grave, he looked back and waved, accepting the loving farewell gestures of his followers. Abhay stood amongst them. Would anyone else like to read?
I can read. A little more than a month later, Abhay was again anticipating an imminent meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this time at Allahabad. Abhay had only recently returned from Vrindavan to his work at Prayag Pharmacy when the devotees at the Allahabad Gaudiya Mat informed him of the good news. They had secured land and funds for constructing a building, the Sri Rupa Gaudiya Mat, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would be coming on November the 21st to preside over the ceremony for the laying of the Cornerstone. Sir William Malcolm Haley, Governor of the United Provinces, would be the respected guest, and in a grand ceremony would lay the foundation stone in the presence of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. When Abhay learned that there would also be an initiation ceremony, he asked if he could be initiated. Atulananda, the Mata's president, assured Abhay that he would introduce himself to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. At home, Abhay discussed his initiation plans with his wife. She had no objection, but she did not want to take initiation herself. They were already worshipping the deity at home and offering their food to the deity. They believed in God and were living peacefully. But for Abhay, that was not enough. Although he would not force his wife, he knew that he must be initiated by a pure devotee. Avoiding sinful life, living piously, these things were necessary and good, but in themselves they did not constitute spiritual life and could not satisfy the yearning of the soul. Life's ultimate goal and the absolute necessity of the self was love of Krishna. That love of Krishna, his father had already inculcated within him, and now he had to take the next step. His father would have been pleased to see him do it. What he had learnt from his father was now being solidified by someone capable of guiding all the fallen souls of the world to transcendental love of God. Abhay knew he should go forward and take complete shelter in the instructions of his spiritual master. And the scriptures enjoined, "He who is desirous of knowing the absolute truth must take shelter of a spiritual master who is in disciplic succession and who is fixed in Krishna consciousness. Even Lord Chaitanya, who was Krishna himself, had accepted as spiritual master, and only after initiation did he manifest the full symptoms of ecstatic love of Krishna while chanting the holy name. As for the ritual initiation, he had received at age 12 from a family priest. Abai had never taken it very seriously. It had been a religious formality, but a guru was not a mere officiating ritualistic priest. So Abai had rejected the idea that he had already had a guru. He had never received instructions from him in bhakti, and his family guru had not linked him through disciplic succession with Krishna. But by taking initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, he would be linked with Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta, son of Bhaktivinoda Thakura and disciple of Guru Kisara Dasa Babaji, was the guru in the 12th disciplic generation from Lord Chaitanya. He was the foremost Vedic scholar of the age, the expert Vaishnav who could guide one back to Godhead. He was empowered by the predecessors to work for the highest welfare by giving everyone Krishna consciousness, the remedy for all sufferings. Abai felt that he had already accepted Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as his spiritual master, and that from their very first meeting, he had already received his orders. Now, if Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would accept him as his disciple, the relationship would be confirmed. He was coming so soon after Abai had seen and heard him in Vrindavan. That was how Krishna acted through his representative. It was as if his spiritual master, in coming to where Abai and his family and business was coming to draw him further into spiritual life. Without Abai's having attempted to bring it about, his relationship with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was deepening. Now Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was coming to him as if by a higher arrangement. Would someone else like to read now?
Okay. On the day of the ceremony, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati met with his disciples at the Allahabad Gaudiya Mat on South Malacca Street. While he was speaking Hari Katha and taking questions, Atulananda Brahmachari took the opportunity to present several devotees, Abai amongst them, as candidates for initiation. The Allahabad devotees were proud of Mr. Day, who regularly attended the mat in the evening and led bhajans, listened to the teachings and spoke them himself, and often brought respectable guests. He had contributed money and had induced his business colleagues also to do so. With folded palms, Abai looked up humbly at his spiritual master. He and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were now face to face, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta recognized him and was visibly pleased to see him. He already knew him. Yes, he said, exchanging looks with Abai. He likes to hear. He does not go away. I have marked him. I will accept him as my disciple. As the moment and the words became impressed into his being, Abai was in ecstasy. Atulananda was pleasantly surprised that his Guru Dev was already in approval of Mr. Day. Other disciples in the room were also pleased to witness Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's immediate acceptance of Mr. Day as a good listener. Some of them wondered when or where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had arrived at such an estimation of the young pharmacist. At the initiation, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was seated on the Vyasasana, and the room was filled with guests and members of the Gaudiya Mat. Those to be initiated sat around a small mound of earth, where one of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's sannyasis prepared a fire and offered grains and fruits into the flames, while everyone chanted mantras for purification. Abhai's sister and brother were present, but not his wife. Abhai basked in the presence of his Guru Dev. Yes, he likes to hear. The words of his spiritual master and his glance of recognition had remained with Abhai. Abhai would continue pleasing his spiritual master by hearing well. Then, he thought, I will be able to speak well. The Vedic literature described 9 processes of devotional service. The first one was Shravanam, hearing about Krishna. Then came Kirtanam, chanting about and glorifying him. By sitting patiently and hearing at Koshi, he had pleased Krishna's representative. And when Krishna's representative was pleased, Krishna was pleased. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had not praised him for donating money to the mat, and hadn't advised him to forsake his family and business and travel with him. Nor had he asked Abhai to perform great austerities like the yogis who mortify their bodies with fasts and difficult vows. But he likes to hear, he had said, and I have marked him. Abhai thought about it and again listened carefully as his spiritual master conducted the initiation. Finally, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta called for Abhai to come forward and receive the Harinam initiation by accepting his beads. After offering prostrated obeisances, Abhai extended his right hand and accepted the strand of japa beads from the hand of his spiritual master. At the same time, he also received the sacred Brahminical thread, signifying second initiation. Usually, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave the first initiation, Harinam, and only after some time, when he was satisfied with the progress of the disciple, would he give the second initiation. But he offered Abhai both initiations at the same time. Now Abhai was a full-fledged disciple, a Brahmana, who could perform sacrifices, such as this fire yagya for initiation. He could worship the deity in the temple and would be expected to discourse widely. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta added Aravinda, lotus, to his name. Now he was Abhai Charanaravinda. After Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left Allahabad for Calcutta, Abhai keenly felt the responsibility of working on behalf of his spiritual master. At the initiation, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had instructed Abhai to study Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which outlined the loving exchanges between Krishna and his devotees and explained how a devotee can advance in spiritual life. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was a law book for devotional service, and Abhai would study it carefully. He was glad to increase his visits to the Allahabad Centre and to bring new people. Even at his first meeting with his spiritual master, he had received the instruction to preach the mission of Lord Chaitanya, and now he began steadily and carefully considering how to do so. Preaching was a responsibility, at least as binding as that of home and business. Even in his home, he wanted to engage as far as possible in preaching. He discussed with his wife about his plans for inviting people into their home, offering them prasad, and holding discussions about Krishna. She didn't share his enthusiasm. Srila Prabhupada, my wife was a devotee of Krishna, but she had some other idea. Her idea was just to worship the deity at home and live peacefully. My idea was preaching.
It was not possible for Abhai to travel with his spiritual master or even to see him often. His pharmaceutical business kept him busy and he travelled frequently. Whenever possible, however, he tried to time a business trip to Calcutta when his spiritual master was also there. Thus, over the next 4 years, he managed to see his spiritual master perhaps a dozen times. Whenever Abhai visited Calcutta, the assistant librarian at the Gaudiya Math, Nityananda Brahmachari, would meet him at Howrah train station with a 2-horse carriage belonging to the Math. Nityananda saw Abhai as an unusually humble and tolerant person. As they rode together to the Math, Abhai would inquire eagerly into the latest activities of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his travelling, his publishing, how many centres were currently open, how his disciples were doing. They wouldn't talk much about Abhai's business. Abai would stay at the Gaudiya Math, usually for about 5 days. Sometimes he would visit one of his sisters who lived in Calcutta, but his main reason for coming was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and Abai would take advantage of every opportunity to hear him. Abai didn't try to become a leader in the inner management of the Gaudiya Math. His spiritual master had initiated 18 sannyasis who carried out most of the preaching and leadership of the mission. Abai was always the householder, occupied with his own business and family, never living within the math except for brief visits. And yet he began to develop a close relationship with his spiritual master. Sometimes Abai would go to see him at the Chaitanya Math, at the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur. One day at the Chaitanya Math, Abai was in the courtyard when a large poisonous snake crawled out in front of him. Abai called out for his godbrothers, but when they came, everyone simply stood looking, uncertain what to do. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta came out on the veranda of the second floor, glanced down, saw the snake, and immediately ordered, "Kill it." The boy then took a large stick and killed the snake. Srila Prabhupada. So I thought, how is it that Guru Maharaj ordered the snake to be killed? I was a little surprised, but later on I saw this verse, and then I was very glad. Modeta sador api vrishchika sarpahatya. Even saintly persons take pleasure in the killing of a scorpion or a snake. It had remained a doubt how Guru Maharaj ordered the snake to be killed, but when I read this verse, I was very much pleased that this creature, or creatures like the snake, should not be shown any mercy. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was reputed to be so austere and so strong in argument against other philosophies that even his own disciples were cautious in approaching him if he were sitting alone or if they had no specific business with him. Yet even though Abai's contact with him was quite limited, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would always treat him kindly. Srila Prabhupada. Whenever I met my Guru Maharaj, he would always treat me very affectionately. Sometimes my godbrothers would criticize because I would talk a little freely with him, and they would quote this English saying, "Fools rush in where angels fear to tread." But I would think, fool? Well, maybe, but that is the way I am. My Guru Maharaj was always very, very affectionate to me. When I offered obeisances, he used to return, "Dasosmi, I am your servant." Sometimes as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta paced back and forth chanting the Hare Krishna mantra aloud while fingering his beads, Abai would enter the room and also chant, walking alongside his spiritual master. Once when Abai entered Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's room, his spiritual master was sitting on a couch, and Abai took his seat behind him on an equal level. But then he noticed that all the other disciples in the room were sitting on a lower level at their spiritual master's feet. Abai kept his seat, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said nothing of it. But Abai never again sat on an equal level with his spiritual master. Once in a room with many disciples, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was speaking, and Abai listening, when an old man beside Abai motioned to him. As Abai leaned over to hear what the man wanted, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta suddenly spoke out in annoyance at the two apparently inattentive students. "Babu," he first addressed the old man beside Abai. "Do you think you have purchased me with your 150 rupees per month donation?" And then, turning to Abai, "Why don't you come up here and speak instead of me?" Abai was outwardly mortified, yet he treasured the rebuke. It was in a private meeting that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta once told Abai of the risks he took by preaching so boldly. Srila Prabhupada. My Guru Maharaj's contribution is that he defeated the caste Goswamis. He defeated this Brahmanism. He did it the same way as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Kiba vipra kiba nyasi sudra keninoya, ye Krishna tattva veta saying Guru hire." There is no consideration whether one is a sannyasi, a brahmana, a sudra, or a grihasta. No. Anyone who knows the science of Krishna, he's all right. He is Goswami, and he is Brahmana. But no one else taught that since Lord Chaitanya. This was my Guru Maharaj's contribution, and for this reason, he had to face so many vehement protests from these Brahmana caste Goswamis. Once they conspired to kill him. My Guru Maharaj told me personally, by his grace, when we used to meet alone, he used to talk about so many things. He was so kind that he used to talk with me, and he personally told me that these people, they wanted to kill me. They collected 25,000 rupees and went to bribe the police officer in charge of the area, saying, "You take these 25,000 rupees. We should do something against Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. You don't take any steps." He could understand they wanted to kill him, so the police officer frankly came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Of course, we accept bribes and we indulge in such things, but not for a sadhu, not for a saintly person. I cannot dare. So the police officer refused and said to my Guru Maharaj, "You take care, this is the position." So vehemently they protested. But he liked boldness in his disciples. Abai heard of an occasion when one of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's disciples had been very outspoken at a public meeting and had denounced a highly regarded Mayavadi monk as a foolish priest. The remark had caused a disruption at the meeting, and some of the disciples reported the incident to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, thinking he would be displeased that his disciple had caused a disturbance. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was pleased and remarked, "He has done well." His displeasure occurred rather when he heard of someone's compromise. Srila Prabhupada, when my Guru Maharaj was present, even big scholars were afraid to talk with even his beginning students. My Guru Maharaj was called living encyclopedia. He could talk with anyone on any subject. He was so learned and no compromise. So-called saints, avatars, yogis, everyone who was false was an enemy to my Guru Maharaj. He never compromised. Some godbrothers complained that this preaching was a chopping technique and it would not be successful. But those who criticized him fell down. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was known as the Simha, lion guru. On occasion, when he saw someone he knew to be a proponent of impersonalism, he would call that person over and challenge, "Why are you cheating the people with Mayavadi philosophy?" He would often tell his disciples not to compromise. "Why should you go flatter?" he would say. "You should speak the plain truth without any flattery. Money will come anyway." Whenever Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote or spoke the Vaishnava philosophy, he was uncompromising. The conclusion was according to the Shastra and the logic strong. But sometimes Abai would hear his spiritual master express the eternal teachings in a unique way that Abai knew he would never forget. "Don't try to see God," Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would say, "but act in such a way that God sees you." Okay, seems like a nice place to leave it. That's okay with everyone. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or comments or reflections.
I think this is my favourite chapter so far. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. There was so much in it. I love the descriptions of Vrindavan. I love the description of his guru, you know, what he was like, how he was trying to be really inclusive in a time that wasn't inclusive at all. And I've just got a lot of respect for him for that. And Srila Prabhupada's respect and love of him kind of shows through it as well. And I love the description of the initiation as well. It's just, there was just so much in that chapter. It was fantastic, really great.
Brilliant. Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
I thought it was almost quite intense. Like you said, there was so much. They're in Vrindavan, the parikrama, the initiation. It's like, it's really hotting up now, you know. There's so much going on, and then there's this thing with his wife that's like just simmering underneath the surface, isn't it? You know, that's just been slipped in there a couple of times. Oh, his wife didn't turn up, you know, like his brother was there, but his wife didn't go. That's kind of there. And then the whole time, this, yeah, it's really starting to snowball. That's how I felt reading it. Like it's getting intense. And I was listening. The bit with his wife stuck out for me because I was listening yesterday. I started listening to lectures by Prabhu, who's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Gives a brilliant devotee. He's passed away now, but gives amazing lectures. And I was listening to some of his lectures, and there's one sort of famous, fairly well-known one by him. And he talks about our motivation for practicing spiritual life. Hema knows the one that I mean. And he says that when we're really suffering, we'll practice spiritual life and practice it, and we'll really go for it. And then we kind of get what we want, that we kind of, we get a comfortable life, and our suffering's kind of eased off a little bit, and we chant a bit and everything seems to be okay. And then we tend to slacken off. And he says in the lower, like when you're in the lower mode and your consciousness is conditioned by tamagun, he says that's just misery. There's no happiness there at all. It's just misery. And then when you get to that mode of passion, he says that's that's miserable. There's some pleasure because you chase after things and get them, but you're ultimately frustrated. And then he said when you get to the sattva gun, the highest material mode, and you're conditioned by that, you just become happy and complacent, and you think the world's all right. And I was just looking at, so Prabhupada was giving that talk and saying that actually that's just, you're still in the material modes then. And that's not actually the point of spiritual life. Means actually to go way beyond it, to push beyond. And so I was thinking about that yesterday, and today I was trying to meditate on it. That it's very easy to become, bhakti is so nice, such a nice lifestyle. Offer your food and chant with your friends and, do these nice things. Everything is kept clean and you go to nice places and, you're hanging around with nice people and read nice books, but you can kind of just get a bit stodgy. Do you know what I mean? And kind of and then Prabhupada's there just saying, my wife she wanted to stay home and just worship the deity, offer food, and just be pious, be religious. Prabhupada was like, no, I wasn't really into that. I wanted to go out and do something and preach. And that's when you really make spiritual advancement, I think. Well, I don't think I know it. Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. So it was nice seeing that. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was inspiring to see it, because it's really easy to get just complacent in spiritual life, kind of get what you want out of things, and then I'll when we post a video to Facebook, I'll post that Prabhu's video in the comments or something, or somewhere in the group, so you can see it. It's a very good video. Yeah, and it's nice. Also, I liked seeing Prabhupada, that appreciation of Bhaktisiddhanta's boldness, that he didn't tolerate nonsense, And Prabhupada also, you see that in him so much, that he, called a spade, basically. And just said, and he spoke the truth in a very plain and direct way, and he didn't tolerate nonsense. And he even spoke the truth when he knew people would use it against him, people that didn't understand, they would use it against him. But he was looking for the people that were willing to accept it, who were themselves sort of bold enough to actually be able to kind of stand apart from the crowd and accept what he was saying. And there's a great integrity. You don't see that in people very much these days, that they actually have integrity. And Prabhupada had it in spades. And he still has got it, because he's still speaking the truth through his books. I say he had it. I should really say that Prabhupada's got it, because he's very much present within his books. And that truth, even though he's physically not there, that that the truth that he's speaking, which really flies in the face of more or less everything everyone believes these days. You know, he kind of completely opposed everything, more or less. And he's still speaking that through his books. Quite amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I also wanted to say thank you for the opportunities you're giving us for service. You know, you're providing your own service, and through doing that, you're providing very easy opportunities for us to serve by reading along with you, by chanting along with you, by donating for your lovely food service you're doing. So I really appreciate that you're helping me to serve as well in a very easy way, like it's laid on a plate for me. So thank you very much.
Wow, Haribo, thank you. No, thank you. It's so sweet when you meet somebody that wants, you know, when you come into contact, and
very refreshing.
Yeah, by Krishna's arrangement, you get somehow put into the association of people that want to do that, and it's like, you know, it's a beautiful thing. We're really honored, you know. Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And does anybody else? I don't think anybody could surely top Lucy's offering from her heart. We could try.
I'll be honest with you, that I missed while I was listening while I was searching on my phone, so I've missed a lot of it, if you know what I mean. But next time I know the script, so I know where we're up to. Brilliant.
Okay, great. It's really great to see you, by the way, because we see your name on Facebook or your profile picture. And I saw your face pop up, and I was going, who's that?
Yeah, who's it? I thought I better put the name down.
And then I realised it clicked. I think I heard your accent, and I was like, oh, okay, from
Thanks, Prabhuji.
Okay, yeah, got it. So you know, it's great. Thanks. I really thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And listening. And
so sometimes I can't come because some days we have it's at 8 o'clock actually. We have like a Manchester meeting with Radha Mohan. So 6:30 was a great time. 6:30 or 7 is always a good time. And on Wednesday there's no problem because we don't have the Manchester meeting then.
Brilliant. Okay.
So it's great to see you two there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prabhuji. Thanks, Mataji.
Terrific. Hare Krishna. Okay. Don't know if anyone's got any other comments or anything to say. Maybe we're just happy. Brilliant. Okay. Fantastic. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai. Vaishnava Sadhu Sangha ki. Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thanks, Mataji. Very good.
And if anyone knows anyone who would like to come and join in, please let them know. We're here every Tuesday. And see everyone soon, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for reading and taking part. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thanks, Mataji.
Haribol, everyone.
Haribol, Mahamantra, Prabhuji. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.